as I've heard from dozens of people in my life, as we hear from people on our media, that this could have been me in the same circumstances. To hear people at all stations of life, African Americans, saying, I'm alive, but questioning for how long, slipping into savage reality of despair for your life and your safety. To be Black in America is to know that a misunderstanding, that an implicit racial bias, that a interaction that should be everyday and routine can become a moment where your life is turned upside down, where your body becomes broken, or when you are killed. This cycle of violence in our country, these spasms that jerk us from our comfort and pull us into the world that is faced by so many African Americans. And then we go back. So many of us go back to what is now normal in America, what has been normal in America. I hear people now talking about the violence, the rioters. I condemn it in the same way that the other 99 members are. It is awful. It is despicable. It is contrary to the aims of this nation and the movements of our past. But to condemn the violence of those out there doing such awful, destructive, condemnation-worthy actions, but to only condemn them and not to condemn the fullness of that cycle of violence, because there is violence going on even when we don't see it in the streets. Peace even is not just the absence of violence, it's the presence of justice. This unjust cycle in our country that we seem to be stuck in, that makes the names of children like Tamir Rice household names. It is connected with the violence that is pervasive in our nation, that demands all of us to speak out against with the same fervor and enthusiasm and energy that people are condemning the violence we're seeing in America today.
God bless. This is Pastor Chris of Victorious Believers Ministries. Well, it's Wednesday night, family night, and we're excited about a wonderful time that we're going to have. I have some dear friends, special guests who are going to be a tremendous blessing to our service tonight. So I want you to share on Facebook, begin a watch party, do whatever you can to share the good news of what we're going to be discussing tonight. This is a joyous night, and as you've just heard, tonight we want to pull together. I believe it is time for healing, the great manifestation of what God wants to do through us as a people, as a nation, to begin to join together and to strengthen our communities. And so as we're moving forward, I believe that God desires for us to heal in our community and to also have the tough discussions. I believe that it may be painful, but it all will come out for our good. And so it's going to make us better as a people, especially as the body of Christ, as we share in regards to moving forward and unifying. And so I've asked some people to come together. The Bible says in his word, it says, many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. And so no matter what you're going through on tonight, it's going to be a good night because God's plans for you are for you to succeed. I want you to bow your heads with a word of prayer with me as we're going to get ready. Our praise team, we celebrate God's goodness. I want you to like us on our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Click the notification so every time that we're going forth in ministry, you can be with us. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your goodness. We thank you for your mercy. We thank you for your love. We thank you for what you continue to do. This is the day you have made. We shall rejoice and be glad in it. Father, I thank you for just your presence. I thank you for our growth and those who are partaking with us on tonight. Bless them in their homes. I thank you for being the lifter of their head. I thank you for us growing on tonight. And most of all, that you will get the glory. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. All right, I'm asking the Victorious Believers Ministries worship team to lead us in a song, and then we'll come right back in tonight to go further with our service. VBM worship team, take us further. God bless you.
Good evening, all believers across the land and country. We welcome you tonight to join in with us as we do our praise and worship, giving God the glory, the honor, and the praise. We thank God for being here tonight, and we want his glory to rise among us. The song simply says, let the glory of the Lord rise among us. Let the glory of the Lord rise among us. Let the praises of our King rise among us. Let it rise. Let's sing together. Let the glory of the Lord rise among us. Let the glory of the Lord rise among us. Let the praises of our King rise among us. Let it rise. Let the glory of the Lord rise among us. Let the glory of the Lord rise. Let the praises of our King rise among us. Let it rise. And we cry, oh, let it rise. Come on, all over the building. Come on, everybody say, oh, in the sanctuary. Hallelujah. This seems the second verse tonight. Come on and clap your hands wherever you are. Let the songs of the Lord, let the songs of the Lord rise among us. Let the songs of the Lord rise among us. Let the praises of our King rise among us. Let it rise. Oh, I hear you in the atmosphere. Let the songs of the Lord rise among us. Let the songs of the Lord rise. Let the praises of our King, oh Lord, rise among us. Let it rise. Hallelujah. And we cry, oh, let it rise. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. And we cry, oh, let it rise. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Let the glory of the Lord, rise among us. Let the glory of the Lord rise among us. Let the praises of our King rise among us. Let it rise. Hallelujah. Let the songs of the Lord rise among us. Let the songs of the Lord rise. Let the praises of our King rise among us. Let it rise. Oh, you sound good tonight. Everybody cry, oh, let it rise. Hallelujah. For the things you have done, we cry out, let it rise. Let it rise. Let it rise. Let it rise. Let your glory, let your honor, let your glory, let your honor, let the praises, let the praises, let the praises, let the glory, let it rise. Hallelujah.
Amen. Thank you, BB and worship team. Let the glory of the Lord rise among us. And so as we do so, we thank God for his goodness. We thank God for his mercy. Again, we welcome all of you who are family and friends, some of you who are guests. If you're a first-time guest, we want you to put that on in the box. We want to follow with you and just say thank you for worshiping with us on tonight. We don't take that lightly. There's so much to be doing on this beautiful, sunshiny Wednesday evening, but you decided to be with us. And so those of you who are watching us via Facebook as well as YouTube, welcome, welcome, welcome. We love you. We know in this season, we're a very touchy family, church family, but we know that we'll have to go to air hugs. So we're celebrating you in the air, letting you know how much we love you and care for you. But again, we say thank you so much for worshiping with us on tonight. I don't want to belabor the hour because I have special guests who are dear to me. They're great inspiration to our community. They do so much to make sure that great things are happening in our area. And so I invited them over the last several weeks. We've had discussions with community leaders. We've met with some of the pastors in our community. We've met with doctors, medical in our community, as well as we've had a mixture. And so God placed on my heart for this week for us to invite other community civic leaders, those who have an opportunity to speak to what our country is facing. And so we continue to remain prayerful because we understand that we want to come together. This is about a healing for us to move forward. And so the Bible says, oh, how good it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. And so it didn't matter what complexion you are, what race or background, it's us coming together. The Bible says, then the blessing of the Lord is commanded. God shows up there. And so this is what we're looking to do in regards to moving forward. So I want to welcome you and just say thank you so much for joining us. To all our family and friends, God bless you. I want to start off, I don't want to belabor the hour because they are here with me. I want to introduce these three wonderful men who are with us on tonight. He's the former president of Saginaw Valley State University, served over 24 years at that wonderful institution. I have several degrees from there. So, you know, I'm a proud Cardinal. He's also a great mentor to many people as well as myself. And I celebrate him, his wonderful wife, Cindy, two wonderful children and some grandchildren who they just love to life. I want to welcome Dr. Eric Gilbertson. He is our first guest. We welcome Dr. Eric Gilbertson to be with us on tonight. Welcome, 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 my friend. Yes, glad to have you. Our second guest, he's a native of Saginaw and grew up here, went to school here at Bridgeport, a good athlete. He's a preacher. He's been elevated now to a circuit judge, and we celebrate minister or elder, but also the Honorable Manville Trice III. So I want to welcome him with being with us on today. Welcome, Judge Trice. All righty. We'll need you to turn your mute is on at this time. And then last but certainly not least, we'll add to this wonderful panel on tonight. We'll honor a good friend of mine as well. He's been elevated as well into our community. He loves young people and just being involved and very supportive. We are grateful to have Honorable Judge Andre. Hello. All righty. Good. Able to be with us on tonight, and what joy it is to our Saginaw community. We welcome you. It's a great opportunity for us to have a discussion with hard-working men in our community, and so we're going to share. It's all about healing, and so just so you know, our theme tonight is American racism, learning from the past to create the future. Okay, so we're learning from the past. Create the future. So with that tonight, I want to start off with asking questions to these gentlemen to respond, give us their open feedback. Let us share tonight. Again, each of you, I want to just say welcome and thank you for being a part of our worship service on tonight. Thank you. We're privileged to have you tonight. All right, the first question, and the platform is for anyone to be able to jump in to answer. We're getting feedback, so if you have something in your background, if you can mute that will help us to make sure that people can hear your wonderful responses. Okay, so moving forward, we know what is taking place in the community, a massive disruption in the land. Okay, great. It's caused a major disruption in the land, and people are uniting. One of the key things that I've seen that people from all across the world have been touched by this. We want to see it. I want to ask you all as leaders, Okay, we say American racism is moving toward learning from the past to create the future. The question that I want to pose to you today, as we simplify this, complete the following sentence. Racism in America today is, you take it from there. Racism in America today is.
Go ahead, Dim. Go ahead, my colleague, Manvel. I don't know if you were chiming in.
You're mute until you speak.
I'm having a hearing.
All right. If you'll mute yours, Judge Trice,
Okay.
until you come in, and then we can speak. Okay.
I guess I'll go ahead.
Please feel free.
You know, racism today is holding us back from who we can be as a community, as a state, as a country, and as the world. And I think the more we have to deal with these issues that have plagued our country for its entire history and before that, it's holding us back. I mean, we could answer that question in a number of different ways, but to me, as a public servant and someone who, you know, is very patriotic, it's holding us back from who we can be. And I think that's what strikes me about today's movement. I'm 54 years old. I've seen things when I was a young child that were more historic, but today I sense that what's happening is real, and it's a force of change, and that can only result in a betterment and an improvement in our understanding of each other. But I think the compelling problem today is it's holding us back from who we need to be and who we can be.
Thank you, Judge Borrello. Someone else. So talk about feedback. Let's look at the history, what you know. Share with us about racism.
If you wouldn't mind, Pastor Chris, can you hear me okay? Very well. So I think we need to start with the definition of racism and what racism is. I mean, it's someone, you know, who is abusing their power, discriminate against someone on the basis of race, who believes with the belief that their race is superior to another's. So just to give some context to my response, that racism in America, and I could use many adjectives to fill in the sentence, but insidious. The fact that we are still discussing and debating the existence of racism instead of investing all of our energy, time, and efforts into the solutions toward eradicating this unregenerate evil is an indication to me, as well it should be to all of us, that it's insidious in nature. And the argument is that in destroying racism in its many forms, the goal is equality and not just to be treated with decency. The galvanizing effect or the impact that this issue has had throughout the country recently is blowing racial equality toward the shore, and has mobilized the masses to unite to assiduously bring about real change. So I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm saying. My response is that, yes, I understand that racism can be overt, it can be open, and it's on full display for all to see. But I believe that in its purest and most evil form, that it's subtle, it's not so visible, but it can be easily discernible. And I think that insidious racism presents humanity with a bigger challenge, because in order to eliminate it, it will take serious, hard discussions and reform.
Thank you. Thank you. President Gilbert, would you like to share on that?
Yeah, I think the one word I wrote was tragic. And I would echo the things that my two colleagues tonight have said. It is an American tragedy. It holds us back. It's insidious. I would only add to what they've said that it also diminishes our stature in the world. This nation that was supposed to be a shining light on a hill has not healed its own home. And it's hard for us to criticize injustice, racism, injustice of any in the world when we ourselves have such visible, palpable examples of our own failures in that regard.
Great points. I enjoyed each of you. Let me ask you, President Gilbertson, while you're at the mic, share your experience of being here. You've been in this community, originally from Ohio. Share your experience and history for those of interaction with those from African American. Give your perspective.
Pastor Chris, I couldn't pick that up. My technology must not be working well. You kind of blipped out on me there.
I'm sorry
Would you pose
about
the question again, please?
Share your history. You know, I know you've been interacting with different leaders in the community, whether white or black. Just give us some history in regards to that, what you've seen in our area, the Saginaw area.
Well, I'll give you some personal history. I'm a native of Cleveland, Ohio, proud Clevelander, a long-suffering Browns and Indians fan. But I grew up in the city, and here's my confession. Our family was quick to move out of our neighborhood. The first African Americans moved in. I was part of the Great White Flight to the city, and it was only later in life actually I became aware of and sensitive to issues of race. I came to this community, which, by the way, is very much like Cleveland. It's sort of Cleveland in miniature, in a way. A community divided in some way. But I made some good friends. Talk about one of them, who's a close friend of yours and mine both, just passed away this week, Reverend Roosevelt Austin. And I want to talk about, at some point in the evening, I hope I can say a few words about his moral leadership in this community. What I saw in this community was the need for, and certain individuals rising to that position, moral leadership that has been, has not made our community perfect, but has made our community so much better than it would have been but for what they've done.
I think that is very good in regards to that, in regards to speaking to someone else. Let me ask you all this question because it's finally important. We have a diverse group of people who are joining us. Answer this and explain this. What is implicit bias? Okay, what is implicit bias? And then how do judges prevent implicit bias from influencing your decision making and ruling from the bench? Okay, so people want to know. There's challenging things and different dynamics that take place. Explain implicit bias for us.
Well, it's also known, Pastor Chris, as implicit social cognition. It is when, rather than being fair, impartial, and neutral, we have a preference for or an aversion to a person or a group of people of which we are unaware or mistaken about their nature. So, how do we as judges prevent ourselves from being influenced by bias? I think it's important for me to note that this is an issue that I regularly address during the jury selection process to make sure that the jurors that we impanel are free from bias, prejudice, or any other issue that could influence the decision other than the facts of the evidence of the case. So, I've had situations where I've had to bring implicit bias to the forefront, and people have acknowledged that because, they have racist beliefs or other beliefs that they could not fairly sit as a juror in the case. But to answer your question, we have to be honest about our experiences that we've had, our experiences with other people, incidences that we've had. And once we have reflected, done an internal self-check, then we must determine whether or not it is in best interest of all involved for that judge to disqualify himself from that particular case. There have been situations where I've had to disqualify myself because of relationships that I've had with people in the past, and maybe that person was involved in the case that I was presiding over, and I had to disqualify myself because of my concern for implicit bias. Also, I've undergone implicit bias training. I've had that training when I was a federal prosecutor, as well as when I was a district court judge. I've traveled the country and I've had implicit bias training to always make sure that that none of those past experiences that might influence my decision would creep into my decision making or my rulings as a judge. Furthermore, I think it's also important, last but not least, it's important for us to have frequent discussions with people from socially dissimilar groups to make sure that we broaden our social circles, so to speak, and make sure that we know and we socialize with people from different cultures, just to make sure, again, that things that might have affected us in the past by way of our experiences does not creep in and affect our decision making.
Great, great. Someone else.
I was gonna obviously echo my colleague Judge Trice's comments. I think I also would like to echo President Gilbertson because although I wasn't one of the white flights, so to speak, I did grow up in a very homogeneous area. I grew up in Gulfside in Saginaw. There was not a lot of racial diversity there. Probably still today there isn't. So what I bring to that into this discussion about implicit bias is this is something I learned, I think, in my early 20s, and I still learn today because I think this is a lifetime of learning, is that we need to acknowledge that each of us comes from a different background and experience, whether we lived on the same street, whether we lived on the same side of town, whether we went to this school or that school, we all bring with us a different set of circumstances. And I think once we acknowledge that, then we can move forward, because you can't move forward if you have assumptions or presumptions about other people that they're this way or that way. And I think that seems simple, but I think that's a very difficult thing for a lot of people to self-diagnose, if you will. Take a look at inward and say, okay, this is the way I grew up, but it isn't the way someone else grew up. It isn't the culture here. It isn't the culture there. It isn't something that was prevalent in another household. For example, silly example, my mother didn't drive. I think I was 12 or 13 years old until I figured out mothers drove. So with that kind of a humorous anecdote, the point is, once we realize we are all different, but there's certain things that bind us. So that is how I deal with implicit bias, because I recognize that no matter what, I have it. And then that leads to the last point I want to make, and it kind of revolves around two words that I use a lot in the courtroom. Okay. One is respect, because I don't think we can have any discussion about a conflict, even though it's a very hierarchical situation in a courtroom where I'm sitting above everyone on a bench, but I have to show respect, because we can't move forward on any issue of conflict unless there's mutual respect. And number two, opportunity. There has to be opportunity. And when you look at those things, and the fact that you acknowledge you have your own way and your own understanding of the world, as long as you respect other people's value system and what they were going through. Hey, there's a lot of times I say to someone on the bench who've been pled guilty, or I'm sentencing someone, we have a discussion. Sometimes people tell me about their background. I always come back with, that serves as an explanation, and I certainly don't know what it was like to be in those shoes. But it doesn't serve as an excuse. And so obviously Judge Trice and I have to impose the rule of law. That's what we're elected to do. But I think implicit bias is something that you have to have a gut check with before you even can move forward, because you have to realize that everybody's a little bit different. But if you implement respect and allow opportunity, even in situations where opportunity may be long, far on the horizon for some of these defendants, I think that's what's important. And of course, we could talk hours on implicit bias, but those are my fundamental things that come from me as a person. I appreciate that question, because I think it's important for people to know about.
Thank you. President Gilbert, if you choose to, I have another question that I want to go, but if you want to respond as well. All right, the next question that I have is this. What is the one thing or several things you feel that the minority community can do to improve the civil rights climate? What is one of the things that you feel in your heart that the minority community can do to improve the civil rights climate?
I think we should let President Gilbertson go first. Did he?
I'm sorry, Chris.
Looks like he's
you were
reading.
blinking out on me. I didn't get the
I'm
question
sorry.
fully.
I put the question right there. What is the one thing we do as that the minority community can do to improve the climate that's going on?
I'm sorry, the one thing in the community to improve?
Yes, the minority community.
I didn't get the question exactly.
All right, one of the judges, as he's looking it up, I think his screen.
I'll go ahead and
Yeah,
respond
I apologize.
and tell you that number one, and I didn't get a chance to do this because I know we're short on time, but number one is doing what you're doing, Pastor Chris. And I wanted to at least thank you, at least at some point, for allowing me to come here tonight and to share my feelings and to maybe learn about what others are thinking as well. But this is number one. You have to get people together. Number two, for those who feel the desire to do change, social change, get involved. Get involved. Not only, the protesters are doing their thing, and that's cool and that's fine, but get involved in the community. Run for office. And of course, last but not least, and I'll be brief, vote. Vote, vote, vote. That is the one equalizer that we have in this country. And if people don't vote, there is no, the disenfranchisement will just keep going. So vote, get involved.
It's good. President Gilbertson, were you able to get that question? We'd like to hear from you on this.
Pastor Chris, I can jump in.
If you can hit question.
Okay, Judge Trice.
My technology's failing me. I'm sorry, sir.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay. Judge Trice.
So I think Judge Borrello hit the nail on the head. I think as a minority community, you have to exercise the power of the ballot. You have tremendous power to vote those individuals who have no concern for civil rights, no concern for racial equality. You have the power to vote those individuals out of office. So that's number one. You also have the power of the boycott. The combined buying power of the minority community is estimated to be right around $3.9 trillion. This is a substantial amount of power. So I think those are two ways in which the minority community can improve the civil rights climate. And I would also agree with my colleague. I think that we need to have more discussions of this nature, sitting down with elected officials and talking about what we do throughout the course of our day, what we do on the bench, what we do off the bench, our involvement in the community. It's so easy for judges to become the lone man or woman on the island because we're trying to preserve the independence of the judiciary. But I also think it's important for judges as well as other elected officials to keep their finger on the pulse and to know what is going on in the community. So I think it's important for our community to hold our feet to the fire, make sure that we are communicating with them and making sure that we know what the needs of the community are and what their concerns are. And I think that's part of our job as judges to make ourselves accessible to the community.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Chris, as I pick up some of the conversation of the churches in this, where social progress has been successful. It's come through what I still call moral, showing and arguing that the status quo is morally indefensible. And that's when social progress has occurred. And there's no one better positioned to do that than our churches.
good. That's good. Good responses. I appreciate that, and you all's honesty as well. What do we need to do to, or what changes may need to be made uh, in our judicial system? What do
I'll
we
let
need?
Judge Trice go first this time.
Okay, I can jump in. I think that there needs to be a focus on the incarceration alternative options that we have available to us as judges. I think there's a wave right now where there's an implementation of problem-solving courts across the nation. And those problem-solving courts are designed to address those underlying issues, those issues that underlie the criminality of an individual. So I think there's a sort of a move away from that traditional model to this problem-solving model, where instead of just incarcerating individuals who have a drug addiction, which has caused the criminality, or incarcerating individuals who might have PTSD, who are veterans of our military. Instead of incarcerating individuals who have mental health problems, let's put them in a specialized program to give them intensive treatment, court supervision over that individual. So I think there's a move right now, even in Saginaw County, we have a number of problem-solving courts. My colleague, Judge Borrello, is part of the adult drug court. I oversee the sobriety treatment court program. We have Judge Bowles, who is also part of the drug court program. We have Judge Fickner, who presides over the mental health program, and Judge Hoffman, who presides over the Veterans Court programs. I would also like to see more funding redirected to those programs so that we can accept more people into these programs. For instance, my program, there is a 70% success rate for those individuals who come into the sobriety treatment court program. That means that they are 5 to 6 times less likely to reoffend 2 to 3 years from the time that they complete our program. So a couple things. Number one, we're making our community safer by treating these individuals' underlying condition. That's number one. Number two, we're also saving the taxpayers' dollars because instead of placing them in prison where we're spending $35,000 to $47,000 a year to house them in a state prison, or $35,000 to house them in our jail for an entire year, we're taking half of that amount to treat them for that underlying condition, and we're making our community safe. So I'd like to see more money directed to these problem-solving courts. And last but not least, I would like to see more people of color on the bench. I owe my good friend, Dr. Gilbertson, a huge debt of gratitude for giving me an opportunity to sit down with him and learn more about the legal profession. And I am where I am today because he mentored me and encouraged me to pursue a career in the law. So I think that's also incumbent upon us as judges to make sure that we mentor young people and show them the different possibilities within the realm of the law so that we can create that change. And that change has to start from the inside, and it will grow out.
Good.
I'll just add this question alone. I know Judge Trice and I could talk for 3 or 4 hours. Quickly, number one, I agree with everything Judge Trice said. Number two, access. We need better access to the courts. We need to be more transparent. And underneath that, and I'll just speak briefly on it, we're engaged statewide in a computerization system that makes the legal system a lot less mysterious than it used to be. My father taught me one thing. He said, well, more than one thing, hopefully, but the one thing he taught me in this area was the law should not be a mystery to the common person, to the lay person. And I agree with that. And we try to, and I think Judge Trice and our bench tries to do that, but we need to do a better job at that. We're operating in a 1980s program in our courthouse right now. It's just inexcusable. That is quickly number one. Number two, or that was number two. Number three, just to give you a little bit of expanding on what Judge Trice said, these problem-solving courts, and Judge Trice has been at it longer than I have, and so I'm learning from him and from Judge Bowes and these others. These, just to let people know, because they hear this and what is it? I'll give you about a minute example of what it is in the drug court, but I know it's very similar in sobriety court and other courts. Essentially, instead of bringing a defendant in who has a severe dependency on controlled substances or other illegal substances, instead of just putting them in prison or even just putting them on probation and having them go to treatment, we guide them. I have a roughly 10-person panel that we meet with every single week that includes law enforcement, prosecutor, Underground Railroad folks, obviously psychologists, treatment professionals, caseworkers. And we have an hour-and-a-half long meeting every single week before we go in and meet with these individuals on a bi-weekly basis. So my point is, and like I said, I could go on and on. The point is, we need these resources, like Judge Trice said, to be centered on problem-solving courts, because they're slow, they're resource intensive, but they work. Instead of throwing someone back on the street and hoping to God that they don't get caught in a McDonald's bathroom overdosing on heroin, they have places to go. They have resources that aren't adversarial. They have case managers who they can call. They have sponsors. It's amazing what I've been seeing. I'm so honored and to be involved with drug court and these problem-solving courts, because this is the way of the future. And I'll just give you a little bit of my bias. When I came to the bench, I heard all about these courts, and quite frankly, I was skeptical. Oh, so it takes a lot of time. No, these courts matter. These programs matter in people's lives. And what Judge Trice does and all of my other colleagues involved, not us, but those people involved, we change lives, we save lives. And that's what the judicial system should be about. It shouldn't be just about incarceration. So with that, I'll hand it off to the president.
Thank you. And I think one of those key things is we're trying to be proactive rather than reactive. We're trying to catch all this ahead of the curve, as well as making and helping families. How do people become aware of the two programs that you talked about? How can we become more educated as a community so that we're aware of the sobriety program, the drug prevention program?
Manvel, did you want to?
I can jump in. So one of the things that I have done, and I don't want that I'm a one-man show. I have a team of individuals that work with me in providing these services to the participants in my program. I have a program director. I have a case manager. I have two probation agents. I have a defense attorney, a prosecutor. I have a licensed therapist that is sitting at the table with me, and I rely upon all these individuals to put out there what we're doing in the community through our sobriety treatment court program. In addition to that, we have a steering committee comprised of many different leaders throughout our community that we engage with. We have meetings with to talk about what are we doing wrong. Can we improve upon what we're doing? I have been at Rotary Club meetings and sitting at the table with clergy talking about this sobriety treatment court program. I've been talking to state agencies and scale and all types of different people about our programs and the positive things that we're doing within our community to make our community safer. And I'll put it out there to those who are listening. If you have a civic organization or if you're part of the clergy, I would be more than willing to come to your church, talk about what we're doing through our specialty court program. I would love to talk about what we do as judges, even as it relates to carrying out our traditional duties. I think it's incumbent upon us, as Judge Borrello previously indicated, that we make ourselves accessible to the public. So not just our sobriety treatment court program, but I want you to know what goes into our sentencing decisions, what goes into the rulings that we make from the bench. I don't want the public to think that, well, I read what happened on M Live or I saw what happened on TV5 and think that's the end, the beginning and the end of the story. I want you to hear everything that happens in between. So I would be willing to, obviously I can't talk about specific cases, but I would be willing to come and talk to your civic organization, your improvement associations, as well as your churches about what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Quickly,
That would be.
I just want to add two things we need in addition to what Judge Trice said, and he has done a miraculous job of going out in the community. I want to follow that lead and do that. But number two, if a defendant gets involved in the system, talk to your attorney about if you have an addiction issue, if you're a veteran, you have a mental health issue, talk to your attorney about seeing if there's some other way other than the traditional court. And number three, and I know this is preachy to everybody, is we need more money. I probably am operating at maximum with my drug court. I know Judge Bose is. So we'd love to have a whole lot more money so I can take more individuals into our program.
Mm-hmm. That's good. President Gilbertson, with you teaching at the university as well as your experience in this judicial system, what are some things you feel, first off, that we need to change? President Gilbertson, is there anything that stands out that you feel we need to change? Okay, maybe he can't hear me. Let's see. Hopefully we'll be able to get it back in. Let me ask you this question. Explain the role of the judicial in combating police brutality. So if you'll explain, what is the role that you serve in regards to combating police brutality?
I can go first. Doesn't matter.
Please.
Okay. Well, and this is obviously, we only see cases that appear in front of us. So as judges, our role is a dual role. One is we need to take up those issues as they come. I personally haven't had a police brutality case come in front of me as of yet, and I've been on for about 3.5 years. But I think, like Judge Trice said, there's a crime prevention council. There's a lot of ways that we can engage with our community, with law enforcement. As you know, there's a separation of powers there, and the police are in a different, they're an executive branch, and we're a judicial branch. As far as what's been happening nationwide, justice needs to be done. I mean, those cases need to come forward. I don't want to comment, to be very blunt and forthright with you. I really can't comment on the issues about liability and immunity. These are very important discussions that I think people need to engage with their legislators about, because there are special rules that apply to certain governmental entities, including police officers. And, that's a 3 or 4 hour discussion in and of itself. But I think we need to call the shots as we see them when they appear in front of us. One of the things, I'll just add this as a personal note, before I became a judge, perhaps some of you know, I was with the city and the county. I was the city attorney and the county attorney for approximately better part of 20 years between the two of them. I dealt with a lot of liability cases with police officers. The one thing that I helped in, for a lot of other people in, is in the city of Saginaw, we now have a community liaison group that's, to my knowledge, I'm not in it, but I helped set it up, that it works. It involves police discipline. Every police discipline, is my understanding, unless it's changed, goes through this community group, which is, I think there's some clergy on that group. There's community leaders in that group. There's just quote unquote regular citizens. They look at adoption of policies. They look at training. They look at discipline, all kinds of things. So I think there's been improvement in that area because of that tie. Again, it all comes back to what I said at the beginning. Pastor community, when they get involved, things happen. I've seen it at City Hall and at the county building. When people come to the meetings, or when they get on committees, when they make noise, the politicians will be held accountable. So bottom line is, the community needs to get involved in what's happening with the police departments.
It's good. It's good. My two other guests, feel free to jump in.
So, Pastor Chris, I would piggyback on what my colleagues already stated. There is a separation of powers issue. You have the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. The police would fall under the executive branch. So we have to be very careful about what we say on this issue concerning police brutality, because these are cases that, if there is an allegation of police misconduct, could find its way in front of me or a federal counterpart. So we have to be very careful about what we say, because it could cause us to have to disqualify or recuse ourselves in the future. But just to, again, piggyback on what my colleague said, I think there are a number of organizations that are out there. I'm part of one organization, which is the Crime Prevention Council, also the Community Affairs Committee, that we look into these types of issues and try to handle the response to the community when these type issues come up. So I want to be straightforward in answering your question as it relates to my role as a judge in addressing that issue. I'm not allowed to comment on that because for the fear of having to disqualify myself and there to be a conflict of interest. But I think without reiterating everything my colleague said, I definitely think there are organizations out there to address that issue, and those long, hard conversations I know are going on.
It's good. It's good. Vitally important. I want to, there's some people behind the scenes that are watching. They have questions as well. So in a few minutes, I'm going to ask them to respond. I want to ask you, each of you, having some technical activities with President Gilbertson. Let me ask you, what role will you champion in regard to racism? What has been placed on your heart? I always call it a burden. But what is the role that you're going to champion in our community in order to move us forward? We know that there are challenges. We know that racism has played a major role. But what area will you champion in this? And then I'm going to go to some questions as we're moving forward from those who are watching as well. All righty?
Judge Borello or Dr. Gilbertson?
I want to see if President Gilbertson's there. Did you get that question, Eric?
He's having some difficulty with his, so I'm trying to. President Gilbertson, is there a role or something that you will champion? And if not, then one of you can.
I'll go ahead. It may seem to be a simple answer, but I need to be the best judge that I can be. I need to do all the things that I've talked about, and I'm actually interested. And I know I had texted Pastor Chris. I wanted to engage a little bit with the audience, and I'm happy to know we're going to be hearing from them a little bit. But listening is a very, very important thing for a judge to do, because it's and I'm going to speak just for myself. I don't know if other judges have gone through this, but when you get on that robe, there's a joke among judges. They get black robe disease or black robe syndrome. I don't know if you all have heard of that, but we kind of say it tongue in cheek. But there's a reality there that happens to people. You will suddenly get elected or appointed, and people call you judge or your honor. The whole, it's a different. And as long as you got to remain grounded, you got to listen, learn, and for me, and thankfully I was brought up in a good way to do this. You treat everyone with respect, and no matter who walks through that door, which defendant it is, no two defendants are the same. Sometimes we give the same punishment, or obviously we look at things similarly because there's a whole system of scoring and guidelines when we sentence. But it's important to just listen and have respect. I think that's the best I can do as a judge. Obviously, implement the law as a rule of law judge that I strive to be. But there's no way you can quantify or put a number on the feeling that you have to do the right thing as a judge. The law is always there, and sometimes it's easy to just say, "Yep, this is what the law says. I'm going to do it." But other times it's very difficult, and we have a tremendous amount of discretion in what we do. In many cases, sometimes we don't. But in those cases where we have discretion, I want to learn about the people. I'll just give you a small anecdote, then I'll finish up. I had a young man before me, kind of when I started, and I don't know what it was about him. He tried to, and I say this because I know he pled. He was very angry at his guardian, and he tried to burn the house down by putting socks near a radiator. Well, that didn't work, obviously. But obviously he was troubled. And one of the things I said is his parents were there and he was there and his attorney was there. I said, I'd like to bring him in my chambers. And of course, my deputies were like, "No, Judge, you can't do that." I said, "Well, why not?" "Well, you just don't do that." And I said, "Well, I'd like to talk to him because I was looking at, a traditional type of sentence or possibly sending down to an alternative incarceration where there's a lot of organization and structure imposed on these folks." And I really wanted to talk to him with his parents there. My point in saying all that, and I did, and we ended up doing that. We went down to the alternative incarceration. But the point is, you have to look at everyone as an individual. You can't assembly line this job. You just can't do it. On the other side, you can't be overly emotional. You have to do what's right, and it may not. And what's right may be something that the defendant doesn't like in a criminal case. But I guess my point is, I'm not going to be out there doing something that judges usually don't do, but getting involved in my community, number one, which I've been doing, and number two, be the best judge I can be and carry out my duties with respect and integrity.
Well, that's good. I hear you talking about taking another step, really hearing behind the story. Sometimes all we hear is just the story and trying to get to the root of things. So we appreciate that, Judge Burlow, in regards to hearing that. Judge Trice, if you'll share with me, what are your thoughts in regards to the burden that you carry?
So I'll reiterate something that I mentioned earlier. I think it's important as judges for us to make ourselves accessible. I think it is incumbent on me as a jurist to make myself accessible to the general public. Again, to have those discussions about the inner workings of our court system. One of the programs that I'm a part of, that I'm involved in quite extensively with, is the Bridge the Gap program, where I sit down with students K through 12. They come to the courthouse in busloads, and we sit in the jury assembly room, and we talk about the court system, the nuances of the court system, how I arrived at a sentence. I believe that knowledge and education is power, and I believe that it's important for us to start with our K through 12 students and make sure that they understand what we do as judges and the importance of what we do as judges, and how we arrive at the decisions that we make. So I think it's important for me to be a part of as many of those type of organizations as I can, so that if nothing else, I can give back to my community. I also think it's important for us to form relationships with different civic leaders and businesses in our community. One of the corporations that we formed a relationship with after I went to our chief judge, Judge Jackson, and talked about the Youth Development Corporation. And instead of sentencing individuals to community service, where they're just going out and putting something on their resume potentially, we want to give them something tangible, something that is going last them for a long time in their lives. So we formed this alliance or partnership with the Youth Development Corporation. I was able to bring them in front of all the judges at a judges meeting, and we formed a partnership with them. And we send our participants, our individuals that we place on probation, who meet certain criteria, anywhere from the ages of 16 to 21, around 18, to 21. And we provide them with a trade. We allow them to choose a trade, and then they put in the work towards achieving the goals related to that trade. They go back and get their education, making sure that they can sustain themselves as adults moving forward. So it's incumbent upon me as a judge to always think outside of the box, to always try to find ways to help people, not just to go along with things because that's how we've done things. It is our job, again, to think outside of that box and try our best to improve conditions in our community through the legal process.
Well, I'm grateful to hear the heart of both of you. I want to continue to go because it's interesting. One of the questions is, what are your thoughts about the funding of jails, privatization, and more inmates, knowing that there's higher revenue, there's an increase of minority incarceration?
I can't hear.
No, he froze up on me as well. I can read the Judge Trice. Can you read the question? It's coming up on my screen. What are your thoughts about the funding of jails, privatization, and more inmates, higher revenue, minority incarceration rates, and the pipeline concern?
Again, I think these are issues that we have to, as a judge, that we have to address at the time of sentencing. Again, we have to put in place these sentencing or incarceration alternatives, and not just it's too easy just to say, okay, I'm going to sentence somebody to jail, or I'm going to sentence somebody to prison. It's much more difficult and a challenge when we're reviewing the history of that person, the mental health history, the substance abuse history, family history, criminal history, and then trying to come up with a plan to be able to help the individual become a viable and productive member in our society. So again, even though we don't have anything to do directly with the funding of jails and that type of policy making, I think it's important for us to think outside of the box when it comes to these sentencing or incarceration alternatives, and also trying to reach young people to prevent them from coming into the system. And again, I think we can do that through providing them with opportunities, doing our best to try to reach them through mentorship and expose them to different jobs and careers in the criminal justice system. And again, I think that's incumbent upon us as judges to do.
I don't know if you and I are the only ones here, but I guess I'll answer it, assuming they can hear me. I agree with Judge Trice that minority incarceration rates, obviously, they're a grave concern to our society. How we attack it and how we address it is a very, very multifaceted approach, is through a multifaceted approach. Unfortunately, we see ourselves at the end of the line, so to speak. We have a set of facts and circumstances with a defendant that we have to deal with, and we have to apply the rule of law. And that's when we have to do our job. That's when the rubber hits the road, so to speak. Personally, and I will say this, as a person and as a person in the judiciary, I am not in favor of privatization of jails of any kind. This is really a broader philosophical thing that is with me. I think the government is accountable to the people. When the government runs a program, it's accountable to the people. My concern is when privatization occurs, then who are they accountable to? Ultimately, a contract with the government, but employees, it's a privatization. To me, is not the answer. And of course, can they both be done well? Absolutely. But I like things that are important services to be with the government themselves. And how we control minority rates of incarceration in the pipeline is, like I said, a very, very multifaceted approach. And I think Judge Trice raised a lot of the issues that we can do as individuals in our community, leaders in our community, to try to help that gross disparity that is just a consequence of what's happening out there. Pastor Chris, are you still with us, sir? What is your what do you see, Judge Trice? I just see the two of us.
Yeah, that's all I see right now. I know that in having conversations with Pastor Chris, he wanted to talk about healing from. It looks like he's back.
I'm back. I'm back.
I was about to take over your show, Pastor Chris.
You know how technology is. Dr. Eric Gilbertson had the same challenge, so he had to step out because we're having difficulties. The question is, what can be done to help parolees to become productive in society, such as finding jobs? Are there some things that you know of? Some have experienced mental health. We're trying to find that healing, like you talked about. Judge Brello, man, you talked several months ago about finding opportunities. Can you speak to us about that, please?
Sure. One of the things that the legislature has done is, I believe, and Judge Trice, you correct me if I'm wrong, if you know the answer. I don't know if it's passed yet, because the COVID thing came about right around the time that I was understanding that there has been some introduction of legislation to change how we deal with expungement. And, again, not as a judge, but as a person in the community, I think, and I've been involved with this in a previous life, being the advisor to the county and the city. We banned the box, so to speak. And for those that don't know what that means, the county, and I believe the city now, no longer asks whether you've been convicted of a felony on their employment application. Personally, I feel that that's the right thing to do. There are so many people and who go through our judicial system who are capable. Is there recidivism? Yes, but there are people who need to be given a chance, and a lot of that stigma attaches to them the rest of their lives. Listen, I used to advise my employers, don't hire felons. I hated doing it because the law is set up so that it's a liability issue. I don't like it, but that's the way the law is. So I think changes in the expungement, again, this is not as a judge, but as a citizen, I think changes in the expungement laws are welcome in my opinion. But we have to educate the employers out there that, felon has this stigma that they went out and murdered someone or they raped someone, and a lot of felons are based on mental health issues. They're based on substance abuse issues. I understand violence and all that kind of stuff, and obviously you got to look at each case individually. But this stigma has got to be erased. We're not going to move forward. These people need to be employed. They need to have the self-worth, a value of self-worth to themselves. They need to be embraced by the community. So what I like to see, and this is something I do, it's kind of maybe in reverse, but a lot of times when I have the option to sentence people to a jail term, I'll actually give them a much longer term on probation so that I can help them through their probation term, so that the Department of Corrections can help them. I always say to the defendants, they're not your enemy. They're there to help you. They're a resource for you. And sometimes these defendants have no other resources to them, available to them. I shouldn't say no other, but very few others.
Limited.
When really, in sometimes it's a blessing in disguise when they get sentenced to probation because they can avail themselves of these programs that are out there.
Mm. Well, it seems like you're very sensitive to the needs of people, and so we appreciate that. And I want to stay in contact with you. I know you as a person, your family as well, and that is vitally important. With knowing what we have in our community, I want to continue with other platforms. I still want to take a few more minutes because people are asking questions, but I want to provide platform to for you all to be able to talk and discuss these difficult topics and resources and what we can provide so we can work together as a community. A quick question: how do judges not fall prey to an assembly line way of ruling? Did you want to answer that?
Yes, I just want to.
Try.
Yes, if I may. So when I was part of the U.S. Attorney's Office as a federal prosecutor, one of the things I was involved with was the President Obama's Smarter on Crime initiative. And so what we would do is we would pull parolees into a room, and we would talk about the wraparound services that are available to them. So I think it's important that the federal government has actually brought that back. We had a meeting, I believe it was about within the past month, where they have brought a program similar to that back. So there are wraparound services for our parolees to take advantage of. And I can get more information on that program, Pastor Chris, and I will forward it along to you.
Thank you. And what we'll do as a ministry is post it, because we're all working together as the priests, as the judges. We understand the Bible talked about in Judges 2:16 that he called for those judges to take care of those who were a problem out in the community. It says the attackers. So I want to definitely deal with that as we work together. There are a group of pastors who have come together to really make sure that we're working together to be supportive. And so with your heart of serving people, that's vitally important. So we appreciate that. Aaron McKissick had a question. I want to address that, and because there's several questions that are coming in. One is, how can citizens get information on judges' records prior to voting? You know, we see on the ballot, you know, so you just kind of check someone based upon maybe what party you're part of. But I want people to be proactive in regards to how can citizens get records prior to voting. I think that's important. And if they are concerned about civil rights, what should citizens look for in those records? I think that's important. And I need us to hear these responses. Feel free to respond. The question, I think, is on the screen.
I'll start that. I have this discussion all the time with family and friends and colleagues and neighbors. It comes up, and I'm not going to touch on the vote versus the appointment process, because the federal judges, of course, are all appointed. They're not elected. They're appointed for life. And there's always been this debate, and you can go back in the founding fathers debated whether judges should be elected or appointed. And I know that's not your question. But I'll tell you what it is. And I know this sounds like a kind of a strange answer, but I believe the best way is literally to go down to the courthouse and stop in and see how a judge conducts him or herself during a trial, during motions. I think you find a lot out about a judge, how they administer the law by just watching what they do. Sometimes so-called records, and they are really accessible. Go down to the courthouse. And again, we can provide information. I can certainly provide that to Reverend Chris here, but I think really that doesn't tell you the whole story. Let me give you a very short example. I had a situation where it's still emotional for me. I had a situation where a female, and this made it into the papers, where a female was convicted or pled guilty to actually second-degree criminal sexual conduct, which is a very, very serious crime. Now, here's a good situation about actually hits the question and the question before, which we didn't even get. I was faced when I went back into my chambers. We had a lot of discussion about what to do with this person. Then I say that's the Department of Corrections, then the two attorneys, of course. Again, the long story short, this person ended up serving 1 year in jail, and then I gave her 5 years of probation. And when that hit the papers, everyone or many were up in arms. Oh my gosh, I've been told never read the comments, but I do. But the point I'm making is there was a reason why that happened, and I'll reveal it here among us is that basically, and I'm not trying to throw the prosecutor under the bus, but prosecutor had a very, very difficult case, very difficult. He had uncooperative witnesses, and basically, if I didn't agree to that type of a plea arrangement, there was very likely going to be a drop in charges or a severe reduction. But instead, I thought the best thing to do was, again, to give the incarceration that had already been going on for about a year, and then continue with the 5 years of probation. And I will give you the epilogue to that story. This person, unfortunately, didn't do well on probation, and this person is now in prison. So my point is, if you read the headlines or you look at the record, so to speak, you see that I sentenced someone to probation with 1 year of jail on a CSC second, which is a very serious crime. Most CSC seconds go to prison for many, many years. So if you just look at my record, you don't understand exactly what happened and how justice was dispensed. And I'm not trying to say that to, maybe you have every right to say that was still the wrong thing to do. I have no problem with that, but it doesn't tell the full story. So the best way to do it, and it's time consuming, but I think it should go down. And obviously talk to your community, talk to police officers, talk to people at the Department of Corrections, talk to defendants, attorneys, and get their sense of what a judge is like and how they are. And I bet if you ask 10 different people about how a judge is, you're going to get a pretty good idea of what they, pretty common themes come through. And I'll throw this, and I don't know if Judge Trice will like it, but Judge Trice is a very studious judge. He's a rule of law judge. He's an excellent judge. He cares. That's the thing. Those are the things you're going to hear about him when you ask people in the community. In fact, that's what someone said to me the other day when I said I was on a panel with him today. Well, he's going to do a fine job because he's engaged. He's a rule of law guy. He does his research. I often walk across the hall and ask him questions that I don't have the answer to. And we kick things around here and there. So point is, go find out from your community, but best thing to do, go watch him in action. Judge Trice?
You're on mute, Judge.
I think can you hear me now, Pastor Chris? So I think it works both ways, Judge Borrello. I have visited his office as well, and we've bounced ideas off of one another, and I think that he's a very compassionate judge, and he's concerned about doing what's in the best interest of this community. So I would reiterate that, and I tell him that to his face as well as behind. But here's the thing: once voters get to the bottom of the ballot, it's like, I don't know who these people are. So then you just start filling in bubbles because you don't know who the judges are. You don't know who all these people are at the bottom of the ballot. I'm trying to change that. I want to make myself, as Judge Borrello indicated, visible to the community. I'm inviting, members of the community to give me a call and say, hey, listen, I want you to, appear at this event so that we can find out more about your philosophy as a judge. I want you to vote intelligently. I want you to vote informed. And I want you to know why I do the things that I do. I don't want you to get your information about me or Judge Borrello or any other judge solely from MLive or TV5. I want you to hear it right from me. I want you to come to my courtroom and sit in my courtroom, and you'll be able to hear why I make the decisions that I made. You'll be able to consider the fact that I'm reviewing a 10 to 20 page pre-sentence investigation report that has all of the information or pertinent information about the defendant in front of me and why I made the decision concerning sentencing. You'll be able to hear the victim of that crime talk about what happened, the impact that that crime has had on him or her. So again, I think it's about accessibility. It's about making sure that judges respond to members of the community when they want to find out more about what we do. In terms of our record, I don't think there is a record out there per se, but I think that you personally can find out more about that judge by spending time with that judge, picking his or her brain, than you would find from any other external source.
Great points. There's several questions about disparities when it comes to sentencing. It looks like African Americans, blacks are longer than whites. Can you speak to that? And so, because we're really trying to get to the crux of things in regards to all of it is similar to what, as an African American, feels like they are more apt to be shot at rather than handled in a different way. So can you speak to that? Because several people are asking these questions. Then I want to go to the next question. For those of you who are joining us, we want to just say thank you. It's our Wednesday night Bible study. So as you do, we thank God for your giving. But with this is very important. And I don't want to rush through because people's questions are being answered. And we appreciate you, judges. We're hearing your heart. And we want to keep this dialogue going. It is a big thing to me as a pastor to bring healing and to bring our community together. And I promise you, Saginaw is going to see a significant difference in the surrounding area because we're talking. So can you talk to the disparities in regards to the sentencing terms that many are seeing, not necessarily just here, but around?
And I want to be very clear about how I sentence individuals and what factors are considered when it comes to sentencing. Let me first start by saying that I think it's heartbreaking when I walk into the courtroom and I see it, I look into the jury box and I see an overwhelming number of African American men sitting in the jury box. I don't make the decision about who sits in that jury box, but it's heartbreaking when I walk into that courtroom and I look into the jury box and I see a number of African American men. The overwhelming majority are African American men. It's heartbreaking. And I don't want you to think that Judge Trice doesn't recognize that when I walk into a courtroom. Furthermore, I don't want you to think that race ever factors into my decision making. I don't sentence an individual based upon their race, whether they be black, white, man, woman, regardless of their ethnicity. What I have to pay attention to is what is contained within that pre-sentence investigation report. I need to know what their mental health history is. I need to know what their substance abuse history is. I need to know what their criminal history is. And I must also consider the nature and circumstances of the crime or crimes that have been committed. And then in that way, make a decision to protect the community or the society at large. That is first and foremost, is to protect society and also to deter others from engaging in criminal activities, as well as to impress upon the person in front of me the severity of the crime that they've committed. So I don't want anybody to ever get any notion that I am sentencing somebody based upon the color of their skin. I never, ever, and I stress it, and I want to make it as emphatic as I possibly can. I will never consider anybody's race in making a decision as to what the length of their sentence should be.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I echo my colleague. The easy answer is, we just don't worry about it. We don't think about it. We're colorblind. And, of course, as much as we want to think that, I think, and Joyce and I had this conversation not so long ago, I experienced the same thing. And I actually walked out of the courtroom and told my staff, I said, do you realize that every single defendant, every single person in the gallery, and the only people in the courtroom who were not African American were me, two of my staff members, and one of the attorneys. Now, here's the question. What's wrong with that? Everything's wrong with that. I don't think you could have a conscience and not say something's wrong with that. Now, as a judge, what can I do? and everyone has to understand this very clearly. I'm not sidestepping the question. We're the last thing they see before they go to jail or they get sentenced to probation. We're the last on that assembly line that you're talking about. We're the very, very last thing. So I'm emphatic that things need to happen way before that, before meaningful change can happen. Of course, we have to be uniform in what we're doing with regard to race. I think that, and again, Mandel, I say Mandel, Judge Trace, my colleague is absolutely, and I think I speak for all our colleagues. I've never seen any hint of it since I've been on the bench. But what's important is, and again, this comes to the same themes I've been talking about most of the night. You have to treat each one individually. You can't look at a young African-American male after I've seen 17, okay, and think, well, here we go again. Another African-American, young male getting in trouble. I'm tired of this. Listen, I'm human. Does that thought run through your head? Of course. I mean, I don't look at it in terms of race, but I look at it as here and they're bad things. You gotta act that way and be a good judge, in my opinion. You have to. This is John Smith. He is nothing like Eric who just came in here. He's got a whole different circumstance. I emphasize that Christ brought up, but it needs to be honest because it's a little bit pertinent. The report we get about background, they're not public because they're a medication. What's the abuse they may have been, what abuse they may have heard during their childhood, or
we're getting a bad disconnect in yours.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm not doing anything. Is it better?
Okay, let's keep talking. I heard you. That's better.
Is it better?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe it's because I'm getting animated. So, but anyway, I'll wrap it up. The point is, it's a kind of a simple answer, but it's not so easy to do. You have to do the gut check all the time. This is a new individual. You look at his case, and thank God we have great people that work for the state of Michigan and the county of Saginaw who help us with these reports that give us a great amount of detail that never gets into M Live, never gets into the Channel 5, 12, whatever. And it's not, I don't mean to bash them. They got to report and they only have this much time to do it or that much space. But every person who comes in front of me, in person, they have a family. They have people that may depend on them. They may be people. So if you don't lose sight of that, you can be a good judge. But the information lays it out. So can we be better? Absolutely. But the most that we can do, I believe, as judges, is treat everybody individually with respect. Now, I will say this in one final point. I do very strongly consider the background as an explanation, not an excuse, but an explanation as to why someone may have a certain station in life, why they may have been corrupted to do some bad things. But I'll tell you something that I believe, and you may be surprised. I'd say, and maybe I'm naive, but I'd say 95 or more % of the people who I see who've done some pretty bad things, there's a good soul there somewhere. And if I stop thinking that, then I probably should get off the bench. That doesn't mean I go easy. It just, I don't know. It's hard to put into words, but this is a very human job. Yeah. And we have to be humans when we dispense justice. So I know that's not an easy answer to the question and how you look at the assembly line and the mass incarceration, but lots of stuff needs to happen before they come to us.
It's very good. I hear your heart as a pastor. I understand because you help people, then changes happen, challenges happen. You help again, and so it's difficult. And so not seeing that. So I appreciate that, having the sensitivity to be able to help those. How and what can be done with the justice and educational system working together so there isn't such a high number of minorities going to jail? I saw a story just recently about the two brothers who played for the professional football. They just pushed through a criminal justice reform in the judicial system, and it was awarded $1.7 billion over 7 years. So what can we do to work together? I think that's the question that is asked. What can be done to work together?
So I relates back to what I discussed earlier. I think, again, making ourselves accessible. So, I have met with a number of principals and administrators throughout our county in the field of education to make sure that our students have an opportunity to be exposed to what we do as a court system. I also use that as an opportunity to inform young people that you do not want to be on the inside of the system. This is an opportunity for you to learn about what we do in the legal profession from the outside looking in. And we've had some very interesting dialogue, individuals who have expressed an interest in pursuing a career in the legal profession, individuals who had specific questions about decisions that we might have made, from a sentencing standpoint or ruling. So I think the exposure to the justice system is very important. And again, I'm willing, whoever those administrators out there are, I am willing to, again, make myself accessible and expand upon the number of school districts that I have met with to have these difficult conversations with your students.
We have to invest in people as far as the educational system. And I know people say that and it's become kind of a slogan, but the amount of money, and again, I'm kind of stepping off my bench here and being a citizen is, when you look around the world and see some of these Scandinavian countries who've gone from, I think one of them, I think it was Finland, was very, very low. And in less than a generation, they are now the number one educational system in the world.
Yeah.
That's because they invested in people. You can't expect anything good to happen when you divest. And that's what's happening in our country. We're divesting in education. We're divesting in resources for our children. When a child comes from a broken home, for example, when there's not a parental unit that is there, it doesn't have to be two, but if they don't see the love and the compassion and the care and the discipline and the structure needed for a young person to develop, we lose that person statistically. They're going to end up in front of me or Judge Trice, and we're going to have to make a decision about them. So the educational system, I mean, again, I could speak for hours on it. We have to invest in this fighting about books and computers and per student and the deficits and this. I mean, that is, to me, atrocious. I don't want to live in a country where we're not investing in our children. When we invest in our children, good things will happen. And again, it's not just about a slogan. It's about doing it on the individual level. When someone needs something, when they need resources, when they're 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, and they don't have a parent around who knows how to do it. We need parenting classes. We need all kinds of stuff. But my point is, we need to invest. Education and judicial system work together. They do their thing individually, but I think I would love to spearhead or be a part of something that we can regularly meet with the educational system, the Saginaw School District, the Saginaw Township School District, Bridgeport, all the school districts. I think there's some things we can do together, but if we don't stop divesting, we're just going to continue to see these same problems, quite frankly.
Well, I'm going to work my hardest to pull those groups together. We all serve on different boards, and I'm going to do all that I can to continue this conversation. I just want to say thank you tonight to two of you. We've been talking. I didn't realize the time. So you all done a great job. I want to say Thank you. I know the people were blessed by what we've heard. It wasn't our typical traditional Bible study night, but this is the word. You are judges. You're the seventh book in the Bible, and very, very important that we need you. We want to say thank you for your commitment to our community and what you're doing. We heard your heart tonight. I honestly believe what has been shared, and thank you for being open with us. I really do mean it from the bottom of our hearts. To those of you who are guests, I just want to go over a few announcements. Again, you heard we're praying for the Austin family. One of our great leaders has transitioned. Great example to us. Tomorrow, we celebrate him. Well done. So to Pastor Emeritus, Dr. Austin Sr., we love him. We celebrate him. Tomorrow we'll be at Zion between 2 and 8 for visitation. Continue to keep that family in our prayers. Also, we have our young adult group, 18 to 35. They're making it happen. Tomorrow night, which is Thursday, they have what's called Masquerade. So they'll be out at Mooney's Ice Cream, fellowshipping with social distancing. Please wear your mask. It'll be Masquerade, ice cream, social gathering. So join them at 7 o'clock. They'll be talking and discussing, as you see on the screen, wear that mask. So they're doing great things. On last week, our young adult ministry did a phenomenal job. They were art and painting, so we celebrate them Friday night. Join in with that. We continue to pray for those families. This is year 5 of the tragic 9 Emmanuel Church. The young man went in and shot those 9 people who were in Bible study. So I want you to be praying for them. This is actually year 5. And so let's be praying for that community. Things are trying to resurface, but it's our responsibility as the people of God to pray, to cease change in our land. Second Chronicles tells us it's important for us to continue to pray. So we want to continue to do so. We believe that great things are happening in our community, and it's going to take each and every one of us for us to continue to do that. So with that tonight, I'm asking you to sow into the ministry. Even though we're not there, it still takes ministry. Here's another thing I also want to bring to you. We're partnering with the Wolverine State Missionary Baptist Convention. And as we talked about, I need you. If you have a heart for young people, if you're tired, I don't need you to make any excuses. I want you to help me read with them. I'm going to be reading to children. You can do it in the comfort of your homes. We're partnering with Pastor Roy Manning and all of them of what they're doing. It's not about our respected churches. It's about pushing and educating our children. So I want to encourage anyone that's watching, join me. It's not going to take a lot of time. You read online through Zoom with our children. We're going to do all that we can to help our community over the summertime to educate them. So we found out about this through our Community Development Corporation at the church, and we're making a difference. Also want to celebrate our police. I know it's been very challenging. I want to thank all of you have given. We were able to support our BV Township as well as the police officers and our fire department and buy them food this week. And just to tell them thank you for their hard work. We want to continue to build relationships. So every seed that you give, we're able to be a blessing to those near and far. And we say thank you. All righty. So with that tonight, we celebrate this coming Sunday. Don't forget fathers. It's Father's Day. I want you to celebrate them and make sure we're going to have our Father's Day service. Join us online at 11 o'clock. And then next Sunday will be Men's Day. We're going to fellowship outside. So not this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday, the 28th, we're going to be outside doing a worship service. We had hundreds of cars that came to our first service. We want you to come again. We're doing some great things for the upbuilding the kingdom of God. So I love you with the love of the Lord. To our honorable judges, we say thank you so much. I heard your heart tonight. I really did. Your commitment to the community and doing all that you can to help those prior to being locked up behind. So thank you so much. To the VBM family, love you with the love of the Lord. Go to our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll be tremendously blessed. We say thank you. I'll close out with a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for your love, your compassion. We thank you for these leaders. We thank you for healing in our nation, in our world, and we thank you for healing in our community. We thank you for what you've done and what you're going to do. We give you the glory and the honor. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Thank you. Even to Dr. Gilbertson had some technical problems.
Pastor Chris, thank you.
No,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pastor Chris, and I want to tell everyone who's watching, you have a magnificent leader there, and I'm not just saying that because he's my friend. He's a great man, and he's doing great things in our community. And I feel honored that he even asked me to come. And so, thank you very much.
Thank you, friend. God bless you all. Thank
And
you.
Pastor Chris, I will extend this invitation to you again. As I previously indicated, this goes out to everyone. If you would like to sit down with me again and have discussions about what we do as judges, I would be more than happy to join you. Again, Pastor Chris, you know how much I appreciate you and the VBM family. And I truly, on behalf of my family, and I am truly blessed to have you as my friend.
Well, we have a few who are a good group that watches. Some will watch later. I'd love to sit down in a forum publicly so we can have these discussions. All we want to do is continue to build bridges. So thank you. God bless you all. Take care.
Bless you.
Yes.